how data, storytelling, and of course, an immediate contact with the consumers can turn every stream into a brand moment. I would like to welcome on stage Grace Banks from Condé Nast and Lara Day, head of eBay Live. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining today. Lara, very happy to be here with you.
Thank you.
Head of eBay Live Shopping, which has just launched very recently, right?
I think we're 8 weeks old now in the German market today.
Okay,
So
nice.
Very exciting. Thank you.
So, live shopping is often seen as this intersection between commerce and entertainment. It has a lot of the aspects of social media. It obviously is a revenue driver for a brand like eBay. Can you tell me, in your opinion, what makes a fantastic live shopping experience? Like, what differentiates it from being commercial to being this really great tapped into fashion entertainment experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing with live, so I think live is magical sort of across the board. But I think the thing with live, particularly for fashion, is that it's this opportunity for folks to really get to know their community and to build their community. But it means that if I'm a larger brand, I get to walk people through the background of the collection. I get to tell the narrative. I get to tell people so much more about where the designs are coming from, what we're thinking as a brand, whether it's moving into circular fashion or working with new materials or whatever it might be, I can actually share with my community. And then I think the second part is, so you sort of have this taking the experience of shopping really into that third dimension of acting it out, of being able to show everything and tell the story. But then the second part, which I think is almost even more incredible, is that then I can actually chat to the people who are watching, right? So as a seller, if now we say, okay, we've spoken a little bit about the brand, but then if I'm the designer and I'm showing you my collection and I have, 120 people in stream, I'm also monitoring the chat, right? And so then if I'm new to your brand and I don't know your designs and I see the fabric and I say, but what is that? What is that stitch? What is that fabric? It reminds me of this. Can you tell me about where this is coming from? If I'm closer to it, maybe I'll ask you something about the references you're making in this collection to a previous one or whatever it might be. But so it's this incredibly sort of agile way, I think, to really speak about your work, right? It's about sharing the story, sharing the craft behind it, and just building traction with a group of people in a way that you just absolutely can't when it's just a listing and it's just, even if it's 14 photos, even if it's a video, that almost becomes static, I think, by comparison to this live shopping experience where you're really, engaging people in real time.
And in your live streams, when you were preparing kind of what your offering was, in what way are you encouraging people, as you say, who are watching the auction, so to speak, to engage? And how do you want creators to kind of respond to maybe someone in the comments who's saying, as you say, what's the seam like on this, or how old is it, or where does it come from, etc.? Like, how does that experience work in real time?
I think it's sort of, it's a two-part thing. I think one of the things in these live streams is that it's driven by the person who's selling. It's driven by their personality. It's also driven in part by inventory. So I think there are very different approaches, right? I think it will be a very different thing if I'm a vintage handbag seller and then I may be spending time really walking people through what these individual pieces are, versus someone who's doing something that's maybe a little bit more quick. Maybe I'm a sneakers person, right? And I'm talking to my sneakers heads, but I would imagine the pace would be a lot more quick. But then I think what we like to say to our sellers really is take the time, right? These people are in the stream with you. There's no expectation that you're selling, 18 bags in 2 minutes. That's, of course, amazing if that's how it works out. Awesome. But that's not the expectation. So it really is about kind of testing and learning and finding your format, I think, and feeling comfortable enough to be quite authentic about it. So I know one of our sellers, and this is a little bit of a spoiler, there's a stream tonight at 5, which all of you should be in. But he's really, really amazing about actually engaging with his audience to the point that someone will say, but I asked you to show me, the red Gucci behind you yesterday and you didn't do it. And he's like, I've got you today and I've brought you something else, And so I think that's awesome. I think if we allow for the time to be there, for it to really be kind of a dialogue, that's when I think it becomes most powerful. And that's when I think the relationship that people are building with their community becomes most rich.
So in terms of a great live shopping experience, would it be fair to say that, say, as to your point, someone has great energy and they sell maybe like 2 bags in one one live stream, but maybe there'd be another one where they don't sell anything, but they establish a great rapport, much like people would at car boot sales or like, secondhand vendors. Is that important too? Like, is a great fashion live stream one where people don't necessarily need to buy the first time, but they're going to come back because they like that person, they trust that person?
I think so. I think that's the case. I'll share with you all. I'm from the art market originally. And so one of the things that you do there, as many of you do, is you build these relationships and you're building them for time. And so this is
like an auction,
it's sort of an exemplar, right? You go in and there might be a sale that day and there might not, but the person with whom you've engaged might very well come back to buy from you 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road, whatever it might be. And obviously, the more you're able to inspire them and the more you're able to sort of be someone whom they trust and whom they look to for your expertise, the more they'll tell their friends, the more you will be building your community in a very organic way. So I think there's no hard and fast sort of, it didn't happen that first time and so it was bad. No.
Yeah.
No, not at all.
Yeah. When I first heard about this platform, the first thing I thought was all the rise of people on Instagram influencers in fashion industry, people who will do, I guess, car boot sales, but like closet cleanings, or they will get rid of lots of their stuff. I remember Chloe Sevigny had one a while ago. It became this huge thing. And the first thing I thought was, well, if you're going to buy something from someone live, you're either going to really look up to them from a fashion perspective or really trust their opinion or their expertise and knowledge, whether that's watches or shoes or bags or whatever. So can you talk a little bit about your experience with creators? I know you mentioned that you have Patti Valapati, end of today, which we'll touch on again later. But what part do, everyone from stylists and celebrities, but also people who have these like incredible archive collections of Japanese fashion or Margiela Tabis or something like that? Like how intrinsic are those sellers to making this all really work for you?
I think it's sort of a two-part answer. So our official fashion category launch for Germany is today. So we're starting to think through this, but we have been live in the US for 4 years and in the UK since May. So we have learnings from those markets. And I think what we found there is that these, I don't want to use sort of like our internal language for it, but we think of them sort of as these anchor points to categories that we're building can make a huge difference, because the expertise that they bring and the, as you've said, sort of the trust that the viewers bring to that, and the communities that they're able to bring onto platform, but then also able to kind of cross-pollinate are crucial. I think, though, that I guess to me, it feels like there's a part of live commerce and there's a part of, giving our sellers this tool. It's almost a little bit of an equalizer. So whilst these people might be the people around whom we're building categories and with whom we're working closely, the tool itself really allows anyone to stream from their studio, right? And so I think that's part of what I like so much, that really anyone could take their phone and go. And you can show me your studio, you can show me your closet, you can show me whatever, your storage space. It doesn't matter. There too, it feels very democratic. It doesn't feel like the buyers are wedded to one of those formats. I think sometimes speaking with sellers, I hear a lot of like, oh, but what do I have to invest to get there? What lights do I need? What cameras do I need? And they get sort of caught up in the tech details of it all. And of course, there's a part of that. A beautifully produced show is a beautifully produced show. Don't get me wrong, but it's broader than that. It really, I think it really is something. It's a way to tell your story. It's a way to build your audience. It's a way to almost create sort of an advertising stream of your business, right? So that you can have your regular marketplace listings or whatever you have, and you can have your regular selling, but you can also have the story that you're telling about yourself and about your wares in your collection.
It has the same attributes as, I guess, social media, where sometimes the lowest price stuff does well. And I'm curious as to, there's a lot of conversation now about how influencers even the biggest fashion influencers are really struggling to make money from it as a full-time career. And I'm curious as to, again, looking at creators, like, is this a really interesting, fresh platform for someone who has a really big fashion profile on Instagram? Obviously, the algorithms are really making it incredibly difficult for creators to earn money now. Like, is there an argument for eBay Live being that place where if you have those fashion credentials and you have this fantastic archive, or you're constantly buying and selling, is that a new frontier for influencers for fashion influencers in some capacity?
I think so. I mean, I think, not a fashion influencer, which will shock no one, but I think if I were, I think one of the things that, I mean, very honestly, I think one of the things that I would be doing is saying, what sort of, beyond my own collection, beyond what I might want to sell of my own things, but what sort of inventory does it make sense for me to consign?
Yeah.
Where can I be the face for someone who may not have the capacity or the time or even, the interest in sort of holding things up with one hand and answering the chat with the other hand and doing all of these things? Because obviously not all of us are destined or want to be destined for a life in front of the camera, live streaming hours a day. So I think, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it would be interesting how it translates.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know. I think some people are born to it.
Yeah.
And then with some people where you think maybe it would have been a good fit, you think, well, actually,
yeah,
there's too much going on or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Can we talk a bit about Patti Valpatti? Can you talk a bit about, so the show is 5 p.m. tonight, German time.
Yes.
Why her? Why her for today during Berlin Fashion Week? Can you talk a little bit about why you chose her?
Yeah, so I think we wanted to, I think our initial sort of starting point planning the stream was to really introduce fashion on eBay Live. We wanted to pair it with Berlin Fashion Week because that felt like the moment to bring it to the community. We've had fashion sellers streaming since the fall because obviously we also wanted to make sure people were kind of, getting a little bit of practice, getting comfortable with the tool. And out of that cohort of folks that we've had streaming since the fall, testing their way in, Andras, who was the seller who will be streaming tonight, really emerged as someone who was just incredibly engaging and brought very much like his own flavor to the streams, is very, very good about engaging his community, and is very, I don't know, I think manages to sort of translate this. It's a tool that's accessible, and it allows you to translate your expertise beautifully. And so Patti was chosen because we really feel that she complements him well. And so it's very much something, I mean, I don't know, I hope my brand team isn't here and will sort of shout at me, but we love working with Patti. And so it was very much something where we thought about, who will work with Andras?
Yeah.
Who makes sense in that space? Who will make sense within his community?
Yeah.
And so her expertise and also her personality were just something that we felt aligned beautifully.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to see how the two of them interact. I'm curious to see how they, tell the stories.
Yeah. Live shopping is a huge frontier for e-commerce platforms in Asia. In China, I think it's like the biggest converter of traffic, which is huge.
Yeah.
I think in Europe it's a little bit slower. In compared to traditional commerce, why did eBay decide to go down this route? I mean, we've sort of spoken about it a bit earlier, this whole idea of like the lot and the art sale is so similar to what you're talking about. But, fashion is such an emotional experience. It's, obviously we're at Berlin Fashion Week and people care very deeply in Germany in particular about authenticity and, the story behind a fashion designer. What challenges and quick wins do you see with live shopping, bearing in mind that, converting kind of relies on someone really connecting with whoever's selling to them on that live stream and immediately, purchasing or not?
I think so. It was a very good question. I feel like it covered a lot of ground. I think live commerce, I think inherently, sort of in its inception, I think live commerce is about connecting people. I think that because our DNA at eBay is exactly that. It's about connecting passionate collectors with items wherever they might be in the world that they're looking for, but really making that connection between people and the things that they love. the launch of Live, and particularly in the collectibles and in the fashion spaces, made a lot of sense to us. We're very lucky. It's a buyer base that we know. It's a buyer base that obviously we work with, and we work to provide the tools that they need. So we have authenticity guarantee in place. We have, which is sort of specific to collectibles and fashion, but we also just more broadly as a marketplace at eBay, we've invested quite heavily in trust. So we have the money back guarantee. We have all of these sort of, protective measures, if you will, that we can extend obviously in live commerce. And so I think that the sort of proposition, particularly to the German audience, which is not the same as we know from the Americans, right? There are very different questions that a German buyer asks than maybe an American or a Brit might ask. A lot of them are around trust. A lot of them are around security, about security of transactions, all of these sorts of things. I think we have a very compelling offering to make there where we say, listen, we're not just a new platform or a new app with which you're unfamiliar. We're bringing our marketplace with which you are familiar, which you do have trust in, which you have experience with, into this new channel. And the sellers that are in this initial cohort are very carefully curated. They're very, deeply vetted. It's a small group of folks that we're going into market with. So there's really nothing to be concerned about. And I think with that, it becomes quite easy for people to say, okay, let me test and learn. And I think sort of tying back to part of your question, right now in Germany, it's nascent. Live commerce is coming. It's tiny. It's 1% of total e-commerce last year. That's a stark difference to China, where it's 34%, even to the US, where it's 4%. So I think going into the market now, we feel that we're able to be the place where people can kind of do those first baby steps into live commerce, even as critical Germans. And I have to say, I'm also German, so I feel comfortable making blanket statements. But I think there's a real safety net there where you say, okay, I know this platform, I'm familiar with it. I can take my first steps into this new format.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's that part of people really trust eBay now. It has become that beloved, I buy loads of stuff from eBay. And as soon as I say to someone, I got it from eBay, there's that immediate connection of like this kind of almost nostalgia of buying stuff secondhand already.
Yeah.
But, you mentioned obviously in China, 34% is huge. I mean, that's, a massive figure. I still think 4% in the US is really big.
Yeah.
1% here is smaller. But what do you think, taking that 4% and, a growing 1% in Germany, what do you think it says that people are willing to buy from live sellers, about our cultural moment or our fashion moment, or, what does it say about people that actually someone holding up in quite a lo-fi video, a top and showing the texture on it? Like, what does that say about fashion now?
Well, I think in part it's, I think it's more than just fashion. I think there is to me, it feels like in this cultural moment where we're thinking of shopping in in parts in a much more kind of commoditized, rote way. If we start thinking through sort of like agentic shopping, like it can become very impersonal. It can become very, I'm thinking in German, unbefriedigend. It can become like not pleasure giving, right? You're doing it, but it doesn't spark joy. And I think in part it's that which this live commerce option, sort of where it scratches that itch, because it's so personal. It's so personal. And so, yes, I'm at home on my couch and you're in your studio, but we're having a conversation over the chat. It's really, really close.
Yeah.
And so I think it's that. I think it's really kind of the polar opposite of anything agentic.
Yeah.
Is live commerce.
To that point, I wanted to talk a bit about the difference between selling and building communities. Obviously, eBay's always been a community platform. Back in the day, people would build, I know people who have kind of incomes from selling on eBay. So how does eBay support people or encourage people to, especially here where a lot of people will be probably selling on eBay or curious to, how does eBay encourage people to build community and not just sell? Like, what's the distinction there?
Well, I think in terms of live commerce, it's, well, I guess it depends. It depends, right? We're a very diversified marketplace. So I think let's speak specifically about fashion. I think that any area in which you're selling things that are so sort of specific and that are, yes, objects of use, but that are so much more than that, are inherently community based.
Yeah.
Like I don't think there's a way to parse those things. I think it's different if I'm selling washing machines. Like I don't know how to create a community around washing machines. But I think anything that is for the both for the creator and for the consumer or the buyer so personal and so laden with emotion is a community sort of interaction. I think the other part is, of course, that as soon as you get into sort of having that community, it's also people are talking to each other, right? And people are excited about the same things. I mean, we're in the room now, and I think it's very clear, like, this is a community. Many of you know each other. Many of you know some of the speakers that are here. You've been thinking about this for a while. You're in the space in whatever way. But it's more than just interactional. It's not just a transactional relationship.
Yeah. We're going to wrap up now, but I wanted to ask lastly, we've touched on it with Berlin Fashion Week. People are very into, the intricacies behind fashion here. If there's someone who has a speciality in an area, like how would you recommend someone market themselves as a seller, a potential live seller on eBay? Like, because when we initially spoke, we sort of talked about having these big fashion platforms, but you brought up that actually if you have a niche in some area that you collect things in that someone might be interested in, like how can people sort of market themselves as potential live sellers?
I think, reach out to us, but no, I think you can, I think the more generous you are with your particular work and your particular expertise, and the more authentically you can share that, the more easily that translates to people developing an interest.
Yeah.
And, from a platform perspective, the more easily that translates into us connecting you with more buyers and saying, okay, how do we slot you into this? How do we build programming around you? How do we make sure that you're able to use this to really amplify your reach, to amplify your community, to build your community? Yeah, we're very open.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Lara. Super interesting.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.